Words can kill, but there are words that give birth. Hatred, fear, truth. Sometimes, one sentence changes everything you believed in. In my case, it was said at a funeral. My name is Ayla Brown, but my birth certificate? It holds a completely different surname, one I stopped claiming a long time ago. Because in that house, no one ever asked me who I was, only who I am. And I was. Grandpa's sunshine. His little girl. The one who loved peeled mandarins and lined up his shoes next to his slippers. After my parents died, he took me in. I was adopted at 4, but I belonged to him long before I even knew what belonging meant. Mason Brown. To the world. A man of respect. But to me? He was just Grandpa, mine, my whole life. And that's why I never felt like a stranger. Never. Until that day. Until the funeral. I was standing by the coffin, holding his watch in my hands, when Sarah, my cousin, walked up to me and whispered, "You're not even his real granddaughter." It was like being thrown out of my own life. The next morning, the lawyer called me. "Mr. Brown left everything to you," he said, "and something personal." Sarah was already sitting there, cold smile, crossed arms, but when the lawyer spoke, "Full ownership of the house, the land, the accounts, is transferred to Ayla Brown." The room fell silent, heavier than a coffin. Sarah said one word. "I'll contest it." See, death isn't the end. It's just the beginning, especially when you leave love behind. But don't say goodbye to the past. When I opened the envelope my grandfather left just for me, I saw one name that shattered everything I thought I knew about our family. There are things that are kept in safes, but the most dangerous ones are hidden in words. Paper can hold bullets better than metal. And this envelope, it was loaded. It was old, slightly yellowed at the edges. It had only one thing written on it, my name, not Ayla Brown, just Ayla. No one told me to read it, but everyone was waiting, like wolves behind the bushes. I felt it when I got home. Sarah was on the porch, arms crossed, voice like a blade. "You think that letter will prove anything?" I walked past her. No words, just the sound of my own breath as my hands shook. At home, I locked myself in my old room, sat down on the floor, and opened the envelope. Inside, one sheet of paper and a thin metal key. The handwriting was Grandpa's, large, clear, legible, like someone who never needed to hide the truth. "Ayla, if you are reading this, it means that I can no longer protect you physically, but I can leave you everything I have chosen." There is a second envelope in the nightstand in my office. The key is in your hands. They will try to tell you that you are not one of us. But I will say more. None of them are one of us. You must know who we really are. I love you more than anything, Grandpa. I sat there, the key in my palm. It was small, like the kind used for safes or secrets. I remembered the oak cabinet in his office, always locked. I never asked. But now, that was my only question. I stood up, walked back out onto the porch. Sarah was still there, watching, like she could see through my skin. "What did you read?" she asked. "The truth doesn't like invitations," I said, "but it comes anyway." The room was silent, only the sound of the key in the lock. One turn. That's all it took, to hear something I'd never be able to forget. Inside, another envelope, thicker, heavier, and a bundle of documents, signed with a name I had never seen, in our family. When I opened the cabinet, the air changed. It was like someone else had stepped into the room, not physically, but fully present. someone who should have been heard long ago. And I heard him, not through a voice, but through the paper. With trembling fingers, I slid the key into the lock. It turned, too easily, as if it had been waiting. Inside, another envelope, and a bundle of stiff folders tied with string. On the first page, a name I'd never seen in our family, James Howell. The title page read, Adoption, Private Record. The date? 1984. I was born in 2000. This was 16 years before me. Who was James? I opened the envelope. No greeting. No Dear Ayla. Just a story. I thought long and hard about whether I had the right to take someone's truth away. But you know, Ayla, it was my truth too. In 1984, I adopted a boy, my nephew. He never knew the truth, not until the day he died. His mother, my sister, gave him up to a boarding school. I found him too late. He didn't need a father anymore, but I became someone to him. He died in 1999, alone, but not forgotten. You were born the following year, and I decided that I would never let the family forget. In our family, we always chose who was real, and it was always a mistake. James didn't become the heir, but he was my first son, in my heart. You are my last hope for honesty. I couldn't breathe. All these years, I thought I was the exception, the outsider, the lucky mistake. But I wasn't a coincidence. I was a continuation, a choice. I took the documents and walked slowly down to the living room. Sarah was there, phone in hand, face unreadable, until she looked at me and saw something new. Did you find something? She asked. Yes, I said. It seems all of us here are a little more adopted than we'd like to admit. On the back of one of the documents, someone had scribbled in pen, "Pass on to A in case of legal intervention." That's when it hit me. This wasn't the end of the fight, it was the start. The next morning, an anonymous envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, no markings, just one sentence written on the flap. You don't know what's coming. There are things you discover with your hands, and there are things you discover with your eyes. Fear is one of them. And that was what was lying in my mailbox. The next morning, I found an envelope. No stamp, no return address, just a sentence handwritten on the flap. You don't know what's coming. Inside, a photocopy, newspaper, 1999, obituary. James Howell, tragic death at age 19. Family declines to comment on circumstances. This wasn't a warning, it was a demonstration, a show of power, a message with teeth. Someone knew what I had found, and they were watching. They wanted me to feel fear, but I felt something else, anger. I had the documents, I had my grandfather's words, and I had one more thing, memory. I remembered how he protected me, even when I didn't know from what, or who. I went to a lawyer, Mr. Felton, old, dry, precise, like time itself. Did you know about James? I asked. He didn't flinch, just sighed, and pulled out a folder he'd clearly been waiting to open. I had no right to tell you, but now, everything's changed. Inside that folder? My grandfather's instructions. The trust had been prepared back in 2001. And the main condition? In the event of an attempt to contest Ayla's inheritance, the second part of the trust agreement shall be opened. The second part? My heart skipped, hard. Felton looked at me and said quietly, "That section questions not only the finances, but the family's legitimacy." I left the office and called Sarah. "We need to talk." There was silence, long, thick. Then finally, "Do you want me to withdraw my claim?" "No," I said. "I want you to understand. That what you started will not end the way you imagined." That night, I didn't sleep, not a second, because I knew, tomorrow, I would open the part of our history no one wanted to face. In Felton's folder, there was another letter, not from my grandfather. It was from Sarah's mother. You can forgive an insult, you can survive a betrayal, but the hardest thing is living with the fact that the person you blamed actually knew more about you than you did yourself. The letter began simply, almost cold. There were no dears. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. Just this. If you're reading this, it means Mason has decided to reveal everything. I didn't think he would dare, not after James. My heart started pounding, fast, unsteady. Ayla, you think Sarah is fighting for an inheritance, but she's fighting for something else, recognition. She always knew Mason wasn't her father, but I made everyone keep quiet. It was a deal, for peace, for stability, for the name. I clenched the page. Mason agreed to give her his name, but not his love, and that destroyed her more than you can imagine. Her fight isn't about money, it's about proving she was worthy of her grandfather, too. I sat, motionless, as the floor felt further and further away. Everything Sarah said, everything I had taken as cruelty, was pain. The letter ended. I'm not justifying her, but I know what it's like to feel like you're in a family that isn't yours. If you can, don't fight her. See if there's anything left to save. P.S. In my room, in a jewelry box, is something Mason could never throw away. It's for you, if you can forgive him. I went to Mary's house. It had been empty since her death. Sarah opened the door. She turned pale. What do you want? She asked. 5 minutes, I said. You have 3. I found the box. It was heavy. Inside, a photo. Mason, James, Mary, young, laughing. On the back. We are building a family, not by blood, by choice. When I turned to leave, Sarah whispered, You don't understand. That's not why he chose you. I paused. I didn't just find photos in the box, she said. There was a note, tucked into the lining, in an old jewelry box. Her voice dropped. There was a name, and a date, and it destroyed everything. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. But one name, written in someone else's handwriting, can change generations of memory. The note was small, yellowed, tucked into a box of old earrings. I unfolded it, expecting nostalgia. Sentiment, something harmless. But instead, I read, Ayla, August 6, 1999. She doesn't know. Don't tell anyone. J. My heart skipped a beat. 1999. That was the year James Howell died. And August 6th, that was my birthday. Coincidence? Or something else? I started shaking, like electricity was running through every cell in my body. Who wrote it? James? Joanna? Mary? Why was my name there? I called Felton. Are you sure I was adopted by Mason after my parents died? His voice was flat, careful. We didn't have all the information, only that custody was officially transferred. You were a baby, your documents disappeared during registration. Everything was handled through social services. I whispered, What about hospital records? The date of birth was confirmed, he said. But the parents? They were recorded, based on verbal statements. I hung up, and just sat there. If the dates matched, if James had died the same year I was born, was I his daughter? I couldn't breathe. Sarah isn't my age. She's older. Could James have had a child at 19? Could that child have been me? But someone clearly never wanted me to find out. My mind was spinning. I didn't know who to believe. I pulled out the photocopies of the documents, again, desperate. And there, circled in red pencil on the back of one of them, was a name, Emily Howell. Who was she? Another secret? Another missing piece? I had to find her. I had to know who she was, and what she knew about me. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the girl looking back. I found her. Emily. She lived 20 miles outside the city. When I knocked and said my name, she froze. As if she had been waiting for me her whole life. Sometimes, the person you're looking for already knows you're coming. And they have an answer. They just don't know if you're ready to hear it. Emily lived in a small house, near an old railroad crossing, where time stopped every time the train passed. She was a little older than Mary, but the expression on her face was familiar, like something I'd forgotten but missed. I said, "My name is Ayla Brown." She paled. Her voice cracked. "You look like him. You have his eyes." "His?" She didn't answer, just turned away, picked up a teacup, poured without looking. Muscle memory. "James," she whispered. "Are you his daughter?" I froze. I didn't know what to say. I had no proof, just intuition, and a scrap of paper, pulled from a drawer full of ghosts. "Did you know him?" I asked. She nodded. "He was my brother." The floor disappeared beneath me. James's sister, which meant she was my aunt. "Did you know about me?" I asked. I knew he left something behind, something valuable, but he disappeared. And then Mason came. He said everything had been settled. She opened a box of old letters, delicately, like they were still warm. Inside was a photograph, James, with a baby. On the back, my Ayla, June 8th, 99. Suddenly, everything around me was white noise. Emily spoke quietly, too calmly. They hid it, because they didn't want another James story. He wasn't allowed to be a father, or part of a family. But he knew. That one day, you'd find me. I looked at the photo again. There was a tiny blur in the corner, a tear stain, old, invisible, and still wet in my chest. Whose tears? I didn't dare ask. I have to show this to someone, I whispered. Emily raised her eyes. But think, she said, your truth could destroy more than just a lie. It could destroy Sarah. I turned toward the door, but a new voice had already entered my head. Who am I now, if I'm not just Brown, but Howell? When I left Emily's house, there was another envelope. On the hood of my car, my name, written in ink, light brown, almost like blood. Inside the envelope weren't just words. There were documents, and a photocopy of a certificate I'd never seen before, with a new surname and an old signature. There are letters you open with your hands, and there are those that tear your heart apart. The envelope was on the hood of my car, white, but in the corner, a dark spot, like a single drop of rust had bled across the fold. It read, Ayla, Jay's last word. It wasn't sealed, just waiting. Inside, a birth certificate, ordinary, almost quiet, until you read it. Not Brown, Howell. Father, James Howell. Mother, confidential. I read the lines over and over again, like repetition could erase the meaning. The paper was old, yellowed, a relic from a past they never wanted me to find. But the signature was fresh, the ink still shiny, as if someone had signed it yesterday. Then I found the letter. James's handwriting. I knew it like a second heartbeat. Ayla, I didn't have the chance to be the father you deserved, but I chose you with all my heart. And if there ever comes a day when you question everything, open this. You are not a fake. You are my truth. I broke. The tears I damned for months burst free. I sat on the sidewalk, letter in my arms, pressed to my chest like a second skin. I was the daughter of a man my family had disowned, a man my grandfather once saved, then lost. And now, he was trying to save me. But if this was true, if I really was Howell, then the will, the trust, the entire case changed. I had to act, but I had to act carefully. I called Felton. I want to make some changes to the case, I said. I have documents. What kind of documents? The original birth certificate, signed by James Howell, and his letter. There was a pause. Then, this changes everything. He was right. No one could call me a non-relative again. But that same evening, another message came. You're not the only one. He left another name, and it's not yours. It was the final piece, the last fragment, or maybe a new question. Because what if the truth has another side, another face, another child? I thought I had already hit rock bottom. But then I learned, rock bottom isn't darkness. It's a mirror. The message came at 2:13 a.m., no name, no sender, just, he left another name, and it's not yours. I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, wrapped in an old blanket, tea cold in my hands. My phone slipped from the table. My heart followed. Another name? Now? After everything? The next morning I called Felton, told him, not on the phone, in person. He looked like the truth had aged him. Exhausted, not surprised, just tired. You knew something, didn't you? I asked. He nodded, barely. I knew James had a daughter. I didn't know it was you. And the other child? He sighed, long, like he didn't want to say it out loud. There's an old notarized document, unofficial. It mentions a name, Cade Howell, a boy, 2 years younger than you. I sat down. I felt sick, physically, soul deep. Why didn't anyone say anything? Because nothing was proven. The document isn't fully signed, and his mother, she died before James. No DNA test, no trail, just a ghost. And where is he now? We don't know. It sounded like a joke, a cruel one. I had just found my roots, and now someone was trying to dig them up all over again. That afternoon, I found another note, folded inside my grandfather's watch. A tiny square of paper, tucked inside the ticking. If you find Cade, protect him. He had no choice, neither did you. I couldn't tell what was inheritance and what was just burden. I thought I had stepped onto the stage as the main character. But what if I was just supporting cast? What if this legacy was never meant to be mine? And Sarah, she didn't know. Not yet. But when she found out, what would it do to her? In my grandfather's notebook, I found another name, crossed out, but still visible. K. Howell. Son? Forgotten? Protected? The last letter I opened wasn't from James. It wasn't from Mason. It was from the one who never spoke aloud, but who, somehow, knew everything. The loudest words are the ones we never say. The most important ones? They remain unspoken. I didn't know what was worse, not knowing the truth, or finding it out from someone else. James's letter was short, scrawled by hand on yellowed paper, kept in Felton's safe, marked with 4 words. Sarah, when the time comes. I didn't open it. It wasn't mine, but it could have changed everything. I gave it to her on the day of the hearing. No speech, no explanation, just a gesture. She didn't thank me. She just took it and disappeared for half an hour. When she returned, she was pale, and for the first time, she didn't sit across from me. She sat next to me. He apologized, she said, voice cracking. He said I was never a backup, that he chose me with his heart, but he had a debt to his blood. That line stuck in me like a splinter. During the hearing, the judge asked, "Are you sure this inheritance is really yours?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of Mason, of James, of Emily, of Sarah, of the baby in the photo, of the name Cade, still just letters on a page. Then I said, "No, but I know one thing. I don't want it to go to someone out of hate, only out of love." The judge nodded. Sarah said nothing. I was left with the house. The case was closed, but the story wasn't. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a child's drawing, crayon, a boy, and beneath it, the words, "Cade, 6 years old. My dad is Jay." It hit me like lightning on dry air. I don't know who sent it, or if it's real, but I know I'm not alone anymore. I don't know if he's my brother, but if he comes, the door will be open. Because sometimes family isn't what you're born with. It's what you don't betray.